It seems the United States is finally losing India. What only a few years ago seemed impossible is now becoming reality. Modi's country is increasingly entering the orbit of Chinese influence, and this is no longer just a diplomatic drift, but a systemic reorientation of one of the world's largest powers. The latest signal came from Prime Minister Narendra Modi, who openly supported Beijing in the new round of trade confrontation with the United States. After Donald Trump announced the introduction of additional 100% tariffs on Chinese goods in response to China's policy on rare earth minerals, India unexpectedly issued a statement condemning these measures. Modi emphasized that tariffs benefit no one and must be lifted to avoid further destabilization of the global economy. For Trump, it was a blow, though not an unexpected one. Back in the summer, at the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Shanghai, Modi deliberately held several closed meetings with Chinese officials, after which analysts in Washington began to say that India had finally chosen a course toward the east. At the time, it was seen as a warning signal, but now, after the public support of China in the trade war, there is no doubt left. India is gradually becoming part of the new economic architecture Beijing is building against Washington. The reasons are obvious. In recent months, Trump has sharply increased pressure on Delhi by imposing tariffs on a number of Indian goods, including pharmaceuticals, steel, textiles, and automobile components. The White House justified this by claiming that India pursues unfair trade policies and maintains relations with Russia against American interests. In response, Modi stated that India would not accept diktats and that the country's foreign policy is based on national interests rather than anyone's demands. This step marked the beginning of an open cooling between the two powers. According to Reuters, in August 2025, Trump indeed signed an order introducing an additional 25% tariff on Indian goods, which caused a sharp decline in Indian exports to the United States and strong irritation in Delhi. At the same time, the Indian authorities began gradually easing restrictions on Chinese imports, opening the market to components, electronics, and rare earth materials from China. According to sources in India's Ministry of Commerce, this measure was driven by the need to stabilize domestic supply chains, but Washington is convinced that it is direct rapprochement with Beijing. India, which only a few years ago was a key element of the United States strategy in the Indo-Pacific region, is now becoming an independent but clearly East-oriented player. Economists in New Delhi state directly that China is the main source of technology, equipment, and rare earth materials, without which the development of Indian industry is impossible. American companies, according to analysts, are too dependent on the political decisions of the White House and cannot ensure supply stability. Meanwhile, Chinese enterprises are offering India long-term contracts and investments without political conditions. An article in the Economic Times titled "Rare Earth: Common Ground" notes that India and China have found common ground in the field of strategic raw materials, which has become a key step toward new economic integration. These developments could not go unnoticed in Washington. According to sources in the U.S. National Security Council, Trump has already ordered the preparation of a new package of measures to bring India back into the sphere of strategic partnership, but the State Department admits that this will be extremely difficult. After the summer Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit, India has de facto become part of a regional axis that includes China, Russia, Iran, and several Central Asian countries. American diplomats acknowledge that Western influence on Delhi's decisions is rapidly diminishing. Moreover, disappointment with the Indian partnership is growing within the United States. The Atlantic Council think tank wrote in a recent report that India is acting not as an ally, but as an independent player, taking advantage of the conflict between Washington and Beijing. The reality, however, is that India is no longer just balancing, it is making a choice. According to former Indian ambassador to China, Vijay Gokhale, New Delhi and Beijing are now engaged in an unprecedentedly close dialogue on joint energy projects, infrastructure, and microelectronics technologies. A particularly important element is the agreement on joint development and processing of rare earth minerals in India, where Chinese companies will gain access to investment and logistics. For the United States, This means the loss of one of the key points in its strategy against China. According to the Wall Street Journal, Trump is considering revising tariffs not only against China, but also against India, accusing Modi of siding with Beijing. However, experts note that the time for ultimatums has passed. India has already built a new model for itself in which China plays a central role in its industrial and technological strategy. At the same time, official Delhi insists that rapprochement with China is not directed against the United States. Trade Minister Piyush Goyal said in an interview with the Times of India that relations with Beijing do not depend on trade negotiations with Washington, but immediately added that India will not tolerate economic pressure. This diplomatic language reflects a simple reality. India is building a new balance of power in which Washington is no longer the center of gravity. Against this backdrop, the geopolitical dimension is also intensifying. After Modi's visit to Shanghai, talks about joint India-China military exercises in Ladakh have resumed, a region where the two countries clashed militarily just a few years ago. Now, both sides speak of peaceful cooperation, which has caused obvious concern in the Pentagon. American intelligence centers report a sharp increase in Chinese military presence in the Himalayas, but the Indian side shows no protest. On the contrary, it demonstrates readiness for joint patrols. This diplomatic gesture can be seen as a symbolic end to the era when India was viewed in the United States as a counterweight to China. Beijing, for its part, is using the moment with maximum efficiency. In Chinese state media, Modi is already portrayed as a wise leader who does not yield to Western pressure. Commentators in Global Times write that India and China are together shaping a new architecture of fair global trade, while the Xinhua news agency directly declares that India is now part of a new Asia free from American dictates. Phrases that once sounded fantastical now reflect reality. In Washington, nervousness prevails. According to Politico, the Trump administration is already preparing a series of closed consultations with G7 allies to discuss the Indo-Chinese axis and its consequences for the global economy. One White House advisor admitted that losing India could be a strategic defeat comparable to the withdrawal from Afghanistan. American corporations, fearing a new wave of tariffs and sanctions, are already cutting investments in India and shifting part of their production to Vietnam and Malaysia. For India, this is a blow, but a temporary one. The losses are being offset by Chinese capital and Asian investments. According to the Financial Times, Beijing and New Delhi have already agreed to establish a special $50 billion fund for joint industrial projects. For Trump, this may become the most painful symbol of lost influence. For the first time in decades, a country the United States regarded as a natural ally against China is becoming part of China's economic ecosystem. And now Washington is left with one question: what to do next? Fight to win India back, or accept that it has chosen another path? So far, everything points to the latter. A particularly alarming signal for Washington was that India, together with China and Russia, held joint economic consultations for the first time without the participation of Western observers, during which they discussed the prospect of creating a dollar-independent settlement system. Behind the scenes of this meeting, according to Nikkei Asia, representatives of India's Ministry of Finance openly stated that the era of American financial monopoly is coming to an end. Moreover, according to Bloomberg, India is considering joining China's digital yuan project for international energy settlements, which would deliver a serious blow to the dollar's position in Asia. Within the White House itself, sources cited by Politico report that voices are increasingly being heard admitting that America underestimated Modi's determination to act independently. Analysts at the Financial Times warn that if the United States does not revise its tariff and pressure policy, within the next year, India will completely lose interest in any alliances with the West.